Okay, so welcome everybody to Thursdays with Franco, where we talk things like autonomous, we talk Apex, we talk anything that helps you do more with data. And it's really good to be back. As some people know, the last couple of weeks was Thursdays without Franco. Yes, I was away. I was bike riding around the York Peninsula. If you're interested in hearing more about my bike ride, then send us a couple of messages, and maybe in a week or two's time, I'll do a little bit of a slideshow around that experience. But this week, we've got Darren Hynett and Jason Lowe, who have been carrying the show while I was away. Hey, Darren.
Franco, good morning. Welcome back. Good to see you.
Thank you. And Jason Lowe, who I heard was doing a really good job with folks like Stuart Coggins. And that worries me because it may mean I may be losing my job, Jason.
Yeah, well, Franco, I think the name of the show, Thursdays with Franco, doesn't make any sense without you. So we have to go with the branding and keep that going. So you're stuck with us.
Now, that's not an accident, Jason. That was a way for me to try and at least keep the show for a while. So, Jason and Darren, what is the show about today?
Yeah, so we're going to get Darren to actually have a look at, as the title says, data to insights in a few clicks. So I'm going to put Darren on the spot with a few things as part of us actually getting started. And really what we're really going to be starting with is actually a bit of a data life cycle journey with Analytics Cloud. So let's get into it. So Darren, one of the things that we typically do up front is load data in, and sometimes, especially with the hackathons I've been doing, is we don't know the level of data quality, what that looks like. So I'm going to hold you to it in terms of how do you go and do this in a few clicks.
Perfect. Thanks very much. Let me just share. So I'm going to start with a spreadsheet.
No, Franco loves a spreadsheet.
There we go. Yep. So this could land in Apex very easily. So this is almost 20,000 rows of procurement data. So you can see there invoice number, line, etc. By its various different categories, products, buyers, states, cities, business operations. And then we've got a whole bunch of metrics around, how much was sold, what was the unit price, on contract, off contract. So standard procurement type information. Now, normally I wouldn't do this. I'd just load this up straight into Analytics Cloud and good thing.
Can you make it a little bit bigger? Because I'm finding it hard to read with my eyes.
I can.
Thank you. Just hit the plus sign. Yep, that's it.
Yep. Let's go. There we go. Bit better?
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Darren.
And
Awesome.
Hey, Darren, I actually also see there's a couple of spelling mistakes in there too.
There are. So if we look at this top category, for example, we've got hardware, which we expect, and hard W-E-R. So bit of a typo there. So one of the good pickups there. The other one in the subcategory, you'll notice here, we've actually got some missing rows of values. So null values. Now in analytics, that's not really a good thing. You can't aggregate by null value. You can't sort of, you can define rows that have null, but that's not really going to give you what you want. And the other one, if we scroll across to look at some of the things here. Now, this one's a little bit more obscure, so hopefully some of you may pick it up. So what we've got here are the various different states and territories in Australia. And if you notice that first one, I've actually misspelt Australian. So A-I-N instead of I-A-N. And as we all know, the actual name is Australian Capital Territory, not territories. So let's have a look and see what Oracle Analytics Cloud can actually do with some of these things as we load them up.
Cool.
So what you're telling me, Darren, is I don't need to fix this up in Excel. There's going to be some sort of machine learning or some sort of clever capability in Analytics Cloud that can deal with the sorts of mistakes that people like myself make.
Absolutely. Yep, that's what we're hoping to achieve.
Cool. I always also you land on New South Wales and Sydney, so I always like a good map or geospatial.
Awesome. All right.
Very nice.
So let's switch across to Oracle Analytics.
Cool.
Right, so in here, I'm on a home page. We did do a session a couple of weeks ago where we kind of went into this a little bit more detail, so I'm not going to do that. I'm really going to focus on how do we get the data that we've just seen in that spreadsheet into analytics to be able to start doing some analysis, and hopefully without having to actually author any reporting. Yeah, so can we actually do it with just automated processes as we go through? So little button here, create, very simple. And you'll notice two things, data set and data flow. So I'm going to actually use data set here. Data set will actually just allow me to load that one single data set. Data flow is like a lightweight ETL process from an end user perspective. So the nice thing with data flow, if you wanted to, you could actually push it to things like autonomous data warehouse. And interesting enough, under the covers, if you load up a file and you just put it to what's called the dataset service, which is where the dataset will go. Under the covers, we actually provision an autonomous data warehouse. So you're going to get the performance of those data flow loads because you're using some of the in-memory capabilities of that ADW. But it's not something you need to purchase. It's included in the cloud. But if you need to load it to your existing data warehouse, that will go fine as well. I'm just going to load it as a data set. So I want to go off and actually find that particular file. I could drag and drop, or I've actually got it here. So you can see I've got my procurement lines for Australia. And I'm just going to open that up. So this is the same Excel spreadsheet that we saw just now. And it's going to go through and actually load up that particular file, and it'll start actually showing me what's in there. And two things it'll do is it'll actually register whether it thinks the field's a attribute. So there's a little A here you can see. Shall I make that a little bit bigger as well, Franco?
Yeah, that'd be good.
How's that?
Yeah, that's good.
All right, so we've got an attribute. And as we scroll across, as we get to the measures, you can see here it becomes a little hashtag. So we've got the actual measures themselves. Things that, because I've done this before with this data set, it's learned how it's going. So, things typically like a year are often stored as a number in Excel. So if you, load it by default, it'll actually then try and make that a measure. Because I've done this before with these particular data sets, it's learned from that particular process and automated and made it an attribute for me. Right. So I'm going to go through now and just add this, and let's see if we can actually use some of that data cleansing capabilities that you were talking about, Jason.
Cool.
Oh, helps if I give it a unique name.
Put a TWF at the end.
Yep. There we go. So we're just loading that information up. Now, the first thing you'll notice on the right-hand side is popping up this thing called recommendations. So this allows you to actually augment or enrich the data in two ways. One is standard out-of-the-box functionality that we deliver. So it's picked up things like, I found a city. I can actually give you the latitude and longitude of that city. I can give you the population of that particular city. So these are augmentations that, from an Oracle perspective, we deliver with the product. However, you can actually go ahead and actually load your own knowledge modules to be able to extend the environment. So an example, you might be a company that sells drugs, and that's not recreational drugs, but pharmaceutical drugs. And when you load up, you might have just a product name, and you want to actually maybe augment that with the various different boxes it comes in, etc. So you can actually, for your particular industry, load up those knowledge modules, and they'll then pop up as recommendation when it finds that field from a product name for a particular drug. It'll actually allow you to be able to augment that information. The other thing it's done is it's actually given you these little histograms to be able to start looking at that information. So the one we saw, the hardware, so the little green bar across here is showing the actual number of records based on that. Now, it hasn't actually highlighted anything, but you can see here, we actually very quickly and very easily can see that hardware. And I can actually see that's less than 1% of the data. If I just double click on that, I can actually go and correct it on the fly. So I can actually go and say hardware, and it's now going to go actually and apply, and it'll actually then roll that up correctly into the hardware above. And we've lost
How
that.
cool is that?
Okay. The other one was, remember those missing rows? So there's a little red section at the end here. So, less than 1% of the values are null in this particular row. So there's a little filter button at the top. I can click on that, and I'll actually filter by invalid or missing rows. All right. And it's giving me the rows there that's gone through. And as I said, in analytics, we typically don't want that. We want to be able to. So I could go and say, either I want to actually put this as unknown, or in this case, I'm actually going to put it as miscellaneous spend. All right, so I'm going to just correct that. Okay, and we can go off and actually start seeing how we're going through with that. And as I scroll across, if we look at those various different categories, etc., that miscellaneous in procurement data is something that we typically don't want. We want to be able to categorize as much of our spend into all these different subcategories, top categories, etc. So from a top category perspective, hardware is top, miscellaneous is second. That's not too bad. Maybe we want to do something with that. But in subcategory, you can see the largest percentage of the data is miscellaneous. So, you know, I'll come back to the end. We might want to actually go and do something with that particular bit of information. Now, the third one we had was the actual state. Now, unlike that hardware and product name, because it's picked up that state is something that is geospatial, all right? It's picked up, you know, I've seen a field with New South Wales, Victoria, and automatically that's mapped back and said, hold on a second, I actually align this to Australian states. But it's come back and said, hold on a second, there is a slight problem with your data. You've got, you know, 99% of your states are valid in terms of the way we'd actually expect this from a geospatial perspective, but 1% is not, right? So, yeah, what's that? Again, we can actually filter that out. And it'll actually come back and show us, if I go back to there, the Australian Capital Territories. It doesn't actually recognize that as a state in Australia. So I can go off and actually now correct that particular field. When I land on the right field, apologies. Right, let's go off and actually correct that one.
That's great.
Hold on 2 seconds.
It helps hard to find to do some of his typing.
Yeah. So we can actually go off and actually then make those changes and correct that as we go through automatically.
Yeah, so well, you did that for the hardware one.
Yeah, correct. So yeah, now we've actually now gone off and said, fine, I'm happy with what I've gone. Can I actually now save this particular data set? So I'm going to go through and say the next step would be to be able to let's go off and actually start creating a workbook against this information.
So now that we've done those changes, we need to apply that. Is that right?
Yep, we just go off and actually say, when we say create workbook, it'll allow me to actually then go off and actually, because I changed the size of my font, it'll allow me to actually, so I can go off and say create, do I want to apply those changes? And you can see on the left-hand side here, it's actually kept a list of all the changes I've made to that particular environment. And I can go off and, yeah, so before I did that create workbook, I could have said apply script, and I'll actually apply those changes and pull them through.
So while let's go into the next one, Alexander asked a question around, is this capability available in all languages or just in English?
I think we support around about 19 different languages. So yeah, we do support, you know, in Analytics Cloud, the various different languages and components coming through as well. But cool. Certainly that, yeah, the histograms and things is language agnostic anyway. It's just going to present the data to you.
Cool. Hopefully that's answered the question, Alexander.
Right. So Jason, we're going to move now to actually, can we get some insights from this data?
Yeah. So what's the next easy way for us to do that? Now, I think from here, now that we've got the data, now can you show me what if I don't know what visualizations and stuff like that is, and I need some help with that, then what can I do?
Cool. All right. So let's apply those changes, and we're going to now load this data into the actual workbook itself. Now, at the top here, there's this little light bulb globe called Auto Insights. Now, that's currently off. You can see it's white. So what we're doing in the background is we're actually introspecting this file and working out three things to start with. Is there a time dimension? And what are the two most relevant statistically measures in the actual data set? Now, when this feature was first released back in March, now we restricted that because we don't want this to take too long. We restricted that to about 75 million cells. That's rows times by the actual columns. And you'll notice it's now just popped up and switched on. So it's, you know, it's turned yellow. So the globe's now on. So it's ready for me to actually analyze. With the version that's just coming out in May, we've extended that. So if you're using an Oracle database, and that might be Autonomous Data Warehouse, because there's some great features in there to do things like sampling of data, we no longer have that restriction. So the data is coming from ADW. It'll actually allow you to have as big as data set as you want, because it'll do that random sampling to make sure, and then actually allow us to be able to then expand that out. So I've got some more insights here. And as I said, the three things it's trying to find. So it's found the values it's really interested are the contract amount and the off-contract amount. And there's, as I said, there's almost 20,000 rows. There's about 19,246 there. And it's now created all these visualizations on the fly for me. So I can scroll through and choose any particular visualization that might be, something I'm interested in actually going through, and then drag it onto my palette. So I'm just scrolling down. Is there anything? Here we go. Maybe I'm interested in this top 10 suppliers by contract amount. And I can just drag that onto my palette. And straight away, it's generated a visualization without me having to actually write any code or anything on those lines. If we keep going down a little bit more, I might want to find, there's a Pareto chart. You might have seen some examples of histograms, being able to look at various different off-contract amounts, being able to look at, some of this spread with components. So if we hover over these, we'll actually get some information around what this. So this is showing, and you can see there, the actual measures and how they actually group together. So you get a good description of what the actual visualization is trying to actually use. If you remember that the one session we did a couple of weeks ago, we actually showed that box and whisker plot for the different components. And one of the questions was, what is a box and whisker plot? So this actually goes through and actually tells you exactly, how those values line up. The average is in the middle, the third and bottom quartile. So it's explaining what it's doing as well. So again, I could actually drag that on into my environment and actually get that coming through.
So Darren, you got really easy ways to actually show really simple charts and visualizations in there. Great that you've got that in place, but next, that's great for building out the analysis, but what if I want to consume, or I'm coming in brand new with some analysis or need to explain stuff, then how do I do that?
Cool. Yep. Let's hop across to that. So I'm going to actually just move out of this one. Let's not save. So one of the things we've actually had in the platform a while is what we call natural language processing. So instead of me actually dragging and dropping the fields, I can actually just use English language to interact with and it'll go and find existing reports, and on the fly it'll actually generate reports for me. So I can do things like show me attrition by employee, and I'm just going to select that. Now I've deliberately misspelled employee. You'll notice there it's coming up with the double Y instead of the single Y, but it's now found a data set. So it's found a data set where it's got two columns: employee count, so it's mapped that back to my misspelled employee, and it's found a column called attrition. So there you can see people who have left the organization and the number of people who are still with the organization. And I can keep refining this. I can say, right, I'm interested by maybe country. And it's now expanded out. Now, because it's picked up that country as a spatial image, it's actually now rendered that as a map for me.
Thanks, mate. I do like a map.
Yep. So, very easily we can see straight away the darkest color here, China. That's where most of my employees are. And, we can see that breakdown between those who have left and those who are still with, and they've had the most people leaving as well. Now, that's natural language processing. The flip side of that is natural language generation. So I can go through here and say, I've got this little visualization called language narrative. And if I click on that, it'll convert that into actual text for me based on all the fields and the records. So it's showing me I'm looking at 15 countries, single country is this, 14 others, and it's actually refined that data down for me.
That makes my job easy, writing those reports for Franco. So that's all cool. I think great to get that stuff, the visualizations in there. The one thing that I always have issues with is if there's a specific indicator in there, how do we form lineages around what are the other factors involved in those kind of decisions? So especially coming back to that employee one, All right, attrition's a typical thing. Then how do I explain that a bit more? Maybe I used the wrong term there.
No, perfect. All right, so let's take that back into that visualization there that you saw previously.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to click and create a new canvas here. And as you said, the field we've got here is attrition. So attrition is a yes or no. You saw that as the first visualization that popped up. And if I just right click here, I can actually go and say, please explain this field in context of the actual data set itself. So explaining this, we'll go through and say, we go 84% of the people are still here, almost 16% have left. And on the fly again, I can just tick that and say I mentioned that. And it's given me all the different charts by different measures and the various different ways that we're looking at that information. But where it gets really interesting is, can I actually use this to actually start using what I call sort of black box data science? So what are the key drivers in the data for people leaving or staying with the organization? So it's come back and actually given me that information and says, there are 8 that are strongly correlated: job level, satisfaction, all the way down to overtime, job role. And again, I can go and say, all right, I mentioned job level. I want to go and see maybe overtime, and I want to see it by work-life balance. So that's just an individual measure tied back to an individual attribute in that data set. Where it gets really interesting is, how do we group those together? So this is now trying to take multiple attributes together to see what's driving attrition in our data set for our organization. So we're interested in those who are left, which is the sort of orangey color. So if I click on that first one, so 36%, pretty good confidence, 87%, saying that people who are doing a lot of overtime and they're really low level jobs. So the job level is 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest level, 5 being highest. Those people are most likely to leave the organization. Next one down, 33%, slightly lower confidence. So again, we're still seeing overtime driving that, but it's also saying where the job role is not any of these. Now, if you look at that, manager, director, research scientist, director, those are typically what we expect to be high paying jobs. So it's saying those people. It's also saying years at the company, less than 4, and their daily rate is this. Again, those are the people most likely. So I found some analysis, and again, I can just add selected, and instead of having a blank canvas, it's now automatically brought those visualizations into play for me.
Cool. So now I didn't really have to do much. Now I can actually start looking at what the data is and what it's telling me, as opposed to just trying to figure out the different ways to visualize it. So Frankie, what do you think?
I'm impressed. There's a bunch of questions I've actually got. So the first thing is being able to load any sort of data in, and the data does not have to be clean. It could be full of all sorts of, errors and list of values that still need to be fixed. You get a heap of insights once that's in there. Once that data is there, I love that little light bulb with the auto insights. And then you come up with the different charts, whether they're the Pareto charts or the box plots, etc. And then, as Jason explained, you can then start to ask questions of the data, which you did. You just started to show me attrition by employee and you misspelt it. And you started to get some insights there. It was being geocoded with the mini maps. And I really like the one where you actually turn it not just into a bar graph or a table, it actually turns it into a 3 or 4 lines of text that someone like me can easily cut and paste into an email and impress my manager with. That actually was really cool. I think I now know where people like Jason and Stuart get a lot of their findings and ideas from now. And then the explain. I know that's been there for a little while, but it's one of those things, as Jason Lowe said, you don't know what you don't know. So the ability to right mouse click and do this explain and bring it up, that's actually really cool. Totally impressed. And the other thing, I think a couple of weeks ago, Darren, you highlighted, there's the Oracle Analytics Cloud but don't forget there's Oracle Analytics Server for our on-prem organizations, and there's also Oracle Analytics Desktop as well. So people can download this from the oracle.com website and get a free version and start playing with data without, you know, any sort of capability up and going.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and then the other side is for any of our SaaS customers that use Fusion applications. There's the Fusion Analytics Warehouse, which sucks all that data in that we've got, and we do have pre-built reports, dashboarding that we can augment with other data that we've got within the organization. So yeah, definitely what we've seen today, you can then apply in many different ways depending on where the data comes from. So Darren, quick question for you. How are we going for time?
I think we need to start to wrap up. I actually think we need to have a part 2 of this because what you've shown us is what is a possible data science experience for people that know nothing about data science, and you're giving them the confidence to do something. But we should probably have a part 2 or a follow-up session on some of the capabilities I know you've been playing with for many years now, for people that have a little bit of an understanding, you know, whether it's Monte Carlo or naive Bayes or some of those other algorithms. There's really simple out-of-the-box experiences to apply with those.
Yeah, so we have obviously some of those pre-built into Oracle Analytics. Yeah, and again, it's kind of a point-and-click process, but we have very strong integration back to things like Autonomous Data Warehouse. So, you know, there's a lot of OML, Oracle Machine Learning, in the actual database tier. And if you've done a model in there, it's very easy to register and allow you to. And the nice thing we've just released, so just come out with the latest version in May, is the support for OCI functions. So there's a ability to be able to write code in Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, and you can now register those code snippets. So if you've written a machine learning algorithm in, say, Python, and register that as a function, we can now actually leverage that directly from Analytics Cloud. And yeah, we're building our capability to directly interact with things like Oracle Data Science Cloud. So yeah, that'll be a good follow-up.